Hi everybody, how's everyone doing? I hope you're all doing good by the grace of God. And just wanted to come to you all again and just share a couple things prophetically related as we are in today's world and the things transpiring right now, even as we speak. I'm here in Missouri doing an evangelistic series, preaching a prophecy seminar by God's grace. And my mind has been, focused more on the topics of prophetic themes, and we just did a presentation on end time events, signs of the times, pandemics, wars, and the gospel. I believe that study, I did that version. It's on Expounding the Bible, not yet on Expounding Adventist Truth, but I'm working on that, on an Adventist version. But just wanted to talk about some things that are happening today as we speak. We all know about the government shutdown and the things that are transpiring there. You go on the news and one side trying to open the government with a clean slate. The other side say they are not going to open the government until they get an extra $1 trillion or so for healthcare or Affordable Care Act. And as a result of the government shutdown, over 40 million people are going to lose their SNAP benefits, government assistance to buy food, and so forth. And then there's other details that are in there, such as, well, maybe a lot of those people they're not citizens of the country, so they shouldn't get it. Or maybe a lot of those people are not working, they're just living off the government, and they should go to work and get off of food stamps and so forth. There's a lot of concepts going on, some of them true, some of them may not be true, and so forth. But I wanted to come today and just look at something a little more prophetically, as it were. Today many people are in danger of losing their SNAPs, and the government has a lot of programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, Section 8 housing, and things of that nature, Social Security and stuff like that. And they're always in the news, they're always talking about these type of government benefits for the American people and so forth. But what will happen in the last days? What will happen during the end times of the world when the government enforces the mark of the beast? The Bible says in Revelation 13 that he will make an image to the beast and shall force everyone, and even the world, to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. That first beast being the papacy, who received a deadly wound in 1798, and now the deadly wound has been healed and has slowly been healing and getting more power. So America's beast, as we know as Adventist, prophecy, great controversy. You could see this, Revelation 13. Again, these are prophetic topics that I've been dealing with in this evangelistic series. And America's beast is going to force its citizens to accept the mark of the beast, and if you don't, they will threaten your financials, no buying, no selling, and you could be killed. Now you could say, well, that ain't gonna happen here in America. America's the land of the free. But what happened about 4 or 5 years ago? We were in the middle of a pandemic, of the COVID pandemic. And what were the government mandates? Lockdowns and so forth. And it was put out that you cannot enter into a restaurant, you cannot enter into a grocery store in many of these places. You cannot go and buy or sell unless you had a mask. And then it went from the mask to you cannot buy or sell unless you have a vaccine. And some places they said, hey, if you don't have a vaccine passport, you can't go into the restaurants, or maybe you can't fly, or so forth. And people's bank accounts, if you look at things that were happening like in Australia and in Canada, even here in the United States, people's bank accounts, especially conservative Christians, their bank accounts were being frozen. You don't believe in taking what? You voted for who? You believe in church and God? Some of these so-called, some of these Christian conservative bank accounts were frozen. You can't buy or sell unless you have a mask, can't buy or sell unless you have a vaccine, and so forth. And that was just 4 or 5 years ago. How about in the future? Can't buy or sell unless you have the mark of the beast, unless you break God's law and accept this counterfeit day of worship, this counterfeit Sabbath. Can't buy or sell, and guess what? We will threaten you even with death. So now you go and look at today, you look at in the future. You think the government would not threaten your SNAP benefits? You think the government ain't going to threaten your Section 8 housing? You think the government is not going to threaten your Medicare or your Medicaid or your Social Security plans? These are all government programs. And one thing that we should understand about government, especially throughout history, government giveth and government can take away. They try to take the place of God sometimes. And you could see this even with the Biden administration and even in the Trump administration. You could see how in the Biden administration, they were trying to put schools in line, schools who receive government funding. And again, this wasn't really put out in the news because the news is mostly left-wing. But the Biden administration was basically trying to coerce schools. Hey, we'll cut your funding. We'll cut your benefits if you don't teach wokeness, woke theology. You don't want to do drag. You don't want to do certain of the LGBT or woke things, well, there's going to be certain fines and penalties. But they could do that. Why? Because these schools are getting government funding. When you're getting government funding, you basically are saying, I accept the government's money, and the government to a certain degree can tell you what to do. You have to accept the government's terms and conditions. So Trump comes in, and Trump kind of does the opposite. He's like, hey, if you do not stop teaching woke, if you don't, with the immigration issue and all that stuff, Trump is like, hey, if you don't, these are now the federal laws. He's changed the federal laws opposite of the Biden administration. Trump is just like, hey, if you are going to continue to not hire certain people or hire or whatever their immigration status, or if you continue to teach woke stuff, then, hey, we're going to cut your government funding. And what do these schools do? They're like, okay, we'll abide by it. Most of these schools are settling. They're not even going to court. But what? They could do it. Why? Because it's government money. So if you're getting services from the government, if you're getting government housing, government work, Medicaid, Medicare, all these things that the government funds, SNAP, you don't think that eventually, when the government says, you better accept the mark of the beast, you better go worship on this day, that's not the seventh day, you better go worship on Sunday? You don't think that if you say, no, I'm not doing that, I'm not going to violate the laws of God, you don't think the government is going to say, well, all these benefits that you're receiving from us, your SNAP that we fund, your Medicare, your Medicaid that we fund, your Section 8 housing that's provided by the government, you don't think they're not going to take that away? And then what are you going to do? Oh, well, you're going to be left homeless. Ellen White says, she says this in Desire of Ages, she says every single earthly support is going to be cut off from God's people. Every single earthly support. Your bank account is going to be gone. They're going to freeze that. They're going to take away your Medicare and Medicaid. How are you going to provide for yourself if you're elderly? How are you going to seek medical attention for your children? They're going to fire you from your job. How are you going to provide now? They're going to take your SNAP benefits away. How are you going to provide food? They're going to take away your Social Security, buy a retirement plan and so forth, and your monthly income. So what's going to happen? Every earthly support is going to be cut off. Why? Because the government funds these things, and if you don't abide by the government's rules, then they're going to take away your government support. There was a woman a while back, and she was convicted about the truth of the Sabbath. And she lived in Section 8 housing. She received government assistance and government housing. And the government also provided her a job so she could work part-time and help pay some of it. Well, she was convicted about the Sabbath truth, and she says, I'm not going to work on Sabbath. The government said, hey, if you don't work on Sabbath, we're taking away your government housing. You'll be left homeless. Now what are you going to do? And sadly, she went and fell back in line and started working on Sabbath and refused to follow the Adventist faith. To some people, instead of God we trust, it's government we trust. And we have allowed the government. Now again, sometimes it might be good. Hey, sometimes some people need assistance. And so if I'm not saying to, I'm not saying to take drastic measures and cut everything from the government away. It is what it is. We live in a world right now where, some people just need assistance. But what I'm saying is we're making a big deal now. And we saw what happened during the pandemic, and you don't think it's going to come back in greater force sometime in the future, whenever that time is, only God knows. We're going to be taking away every single support. And the devil is going to think, hey, if they have no food, if they cannot have a way to provide clothing, then guess what? They'll come back and accept the wine of Babylon and accept the mark of the beast and forget about the laws of God. These are the devil's tactics. So just putting it out there, prophetically, every single earthly support is going to be cut off if you do not accept the mark of the beast. And this is just something that, we have to think about. They're cutting some benefits now, and it's not the government doing it purposefully, because the mark of the beast is not being enforced right now in this day. But many people are fretting over, hey, I'm losing my government support, government assistance, food snaps. Well, how are they going to be fretting even more if they're going to be threatened sometime in the future? We all saw how the world went crazy during the pandemic 4 or 5 years ago. And many people, to receive their benefits, they got their vaccines, or they wore whatever they told them to wear. You can't fly, you can't attend your brother-in-law's wedding or your brother's wedding or whatever unless you get this jab. And many people did it. Many people were threatened with their jobs. If you don't get this jab, I know some people in the military, and they were threatened with being dishonorably discharged, and no pension, no retirement plan, no health system, because they refused to take a vaccine. So these are things that had happened 4 or 5 years ago, and now we see things happening now where people are losing some benefits. What do you think is going to happen in the future when the mark of the beast and the Sunday law issue and the Sabbath issue comes up, and the government says, hey, all those things that you're taking from us, all this government assisting, all these food snaps, all these Section 8 housing, all this stuff that is actually, when you look at it, it's meant to shape our minds to rely on the government, because if you're on Section 8 housing and all these government programs, that is only there if you are at a certain income, most probably a lower income. And if you try to increase your income, well, the government is going to help less because they see that you're making more money. So the system is kind of meant and installed in the long run, designed to have you rely on government. There was recently, about a month ago, there was a teenager or a boy who lived with his mom, and he was probably, I don't know, maybe around 16, 17 or so forth, 18. And he said to his mother, who lived in government housing, Section 8 housing, he said, Mom, I want to go get a job. And she's like, what do you want to get a job for? And he said, because all my friends, they have nice things. They have nice shoes. They're able to afford, some food, some other things. They got a job. They could pay for it. I don't have a job. I can't get anything. So I want a job. I want to go and earn some money so I could, buy some nice clothes, buy some nice shoes, and, be responsible. Everybody should want to do that. I got a job, and that's how, by God's grace, I was able to pay enough for my car. And the mother said, no, you ain't getting no job. You ain't going to go get no job. And he's like, why? And she said, because if you get a job, then we have to report higher income, and the government's going to take away our government housing. So for the sake of having the government provide for you, you're not going to work. You're not going to go and be responsible. You're not going to go into the world and experience life. You're not going to make money. You're not going to earn money. So you're always going to be reliant on someone else. And this is kind of the mindset that many people have. Again, some, not all. Some actually do need some help until they can get back on their feet. But that's kind of the thing that it was designed. You could see it in the long run. So when all that gets taken away, what are we going to do? You have no money. They froze your bank account because you ain't accepting the mark of the beast. We saw that 5 years ago. You don't want to take a jab. You don't want to accept the government's lockdowns and rules. We're going to freeze your bank account. The government can do that. It's unconstitutional. It's wrong. But they say, hey, we're providing all y'all's government benefits. Section 8, SNAP, Medicare, Medicaid. We're funding Social Security. Government is like, all that's in the chopping block if you don't accept the mark of the beast. So like Daniel says, I think it's Daniel 12 verse 1, there's going to be trouble such as never before seen. Persecution is going to come against God's people who refuse to accept the mark of the beast. So this is just an idea, just a concept that I was thinking about, you know, since we with the government shutdown and things that are going, and just thought, you know, how is it going to be like in the future, especially since I just did the study on the signs of the times and end time events that will happen when Jesus comes. And I mentioned a lot of things about the COVID pandemic and parallel what will happen in the future. And I started thinking about what's happening right now. So you let me know what you think. Like, share, and subscribe. Put in the comments below what's your opinion. And until then, I hope that you all have a blessed day.